Welcome to the Luxury Listing Specialist Podcast with Michael LaFido, where top luxury agents reveal their best practices, plus interviews with real estate industry influencers, thought leaders, and luxury marketing experts. You'll come away from each episode with new strategies and tactics to dominate high-end homes in any market. And now for the latest episode of Luxury Listing Specialist. Here's your host, luxury real estate expert, coach, and trainer, Michael LaFido.
Hey folks, it's Michael LaFido from the Luxury Listing Podcast and the Luxury Listing Specialist Certification. I'm really excited about today's guest, Chad Roffers from Concierge Auctions. Now, many people think about auctions and they think distressed properties, and that's not the case. When we're talking about some of the high-end, some of the most expensive or unique properties globally, many sellers choose the auction option because it increases the probability of getting top dollar well above sometimes market value, or in many cases market value. And most importantly, instead of sitting years on the market, in some cases, they're getting their property sold in less than 60 days. So with that being said, I want to introduce Chad. Chad, say hello to everyone.
Michael, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to do the program today.
No, you're absolutely welcome, and we're excited to have you. Again, we have Chad, just to kind of give you some background, we interview some of the top luxury agents, thought leaders throughout the industry, and from time to time, we bring on people such as yourself that have such a unique product offering, something that's a void that's needed in our industry. And I always tell agents, it's our fiduciary responsibility to present all options to a seller. And I'm a big believer in the luxury auction space. So tell us a little bit about Concierge and how long you guys have been around, and kind of the history to where you're at today, if you don't mind.
Yeah, be delighted to. So the firm was founded in 2008 in really, what was as we all probably remember, the depths of the real estate downturn. And really, we recognized that there was an opportunity where we could take the auction process and really move it into the mainstream as a way for the discerning sellers, high net worth sellers, to choose a different path to accomplishing their goal of selling a property. And certainly, as you pointed out, historically, the auction process was associated with distress, and we really saw an opportunity the other way. My colleague Laura Brady and I had spent a number of years in the luxury brokerage business, and so really understood the pain points around a luxury property as an owner or as a listing agent, and really at times how difficult, regardless of market conditions, it can be to find the right buyer. And also kind of early on, we recognized, and this is, certainly pre-Uber, but certainly, kind of in and around the onset of Zillow, really recognized technology, and how it was going to change real estate, and also how consumer expectations were evolving, and the fact that more than ever, especially affluent buyers and sellers, they want control, and they want results, when they want them. And so we saw an opportunity to capitalize on that kind of macro change, and at the same time build on, the fundamentals of what we knew it took to sell a luxury property, and kind of blend that into the platform, at least the start of the platform in 2008.
Yeah, and I appreciate that history. And you said 2008, and you're the chairman of Concierge Auctions, correct?
That's correct.
And you said there's an opportunity, but and correct me if I'm wrong, there's not just an opportunity that it was needed, but there was a need for it, right? I mean, some of these marketplaces, there's years of inventory, and how do you create urgency when there's 3, 4, 5 years of inventory, yeah, and there's no sense of urgency? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I agree. I would actually say that even today, we track closely most of the luxury markets around the U.S. and really study, the supply and the demand, and and really dissect the top transactions in given markets. And the reality is the state of the universe today for luxury isn't that different than 2008. Now, obviously, the world was in a really difficult place in 2008, and the opportunity was, sellers really were open to figuring out, recognize there was, if they wanted to sell, they really needed to explore their options. So it gave us, an at-bat, if you will, that maybe historically we didn't have. But fast forward to today, the fundamentals haven't changed that much. I mean, if you look at almost every luxury market in the U.S., and we study this closely, and you take, let's say, the top 10 sales in Chicago or the top 10 sales in Phoenix or Aspen, or pick a market, sure, and you dissect those top 10 sales, you're going to find two things. One is 25 to 35% of the properties sell quickly for 90+% a list. And quickly is less than 90 days. And the reality is a lot of those properties are, single digit days. I presume some of those are pocket listings or off-market sales that ultimately get recorded because the agent wants and deserves credit for putting a significant transaction together. Mm-hmm. And then you have at the other end of the spectrum, 2/3 of the properties that sit for 3 to 5 years and sell on average for 70% of the original asking price. And that trend is universal across every market, even the hottest markets. And so, fundamentally, and then you layer in all the transparency that exists in today's real estate world with Zillow and other providers with, there's a ton of transparency about how long a property's been for sale and the price history. And, our platform is a solution for that, kind of that problem. And so that's, really why we've been able to thrive.
Yeah, and those numbers are alarming, and you're absolutely right. 3 to 5 years of inventory. So at the time of this recording, I currently represent 5 properties above $5.5 million. And last year in Chicagoland, for example, there were only 3 properties, single family, that sold above $5 million. And so, I'm an optimist and a realist in the same token. And so, of course, I want to get all 5 sold, but that's going to be a tall order. For example, there's a town in Highland Park, Illinois, and I represent a property there that's over 5.5. And last year there were only 2 properties that sold $4 million and above in that town, but yet there's 8 on the market. So do the math. That's 4 years of inventory. So what you're saying is, especially that upper echelon in that marketplace, it's either going to sell really quick, and that's a third or less, but 2/3 of them are just going to accumulate days on the market, which is holding costs, taxes, insurance, and buyers look at that as, hey, something's wrong with it, and if it wasn't good for somebody else, why do I want to put my name on it? Because I'm a smart business person, and I'm going to have a difficult time selling it as well. Is that true to say?
Yeah, it's very true, and I think that our kind of view, and this is even evolving, but if a client calls us and says, I have a luxury property, pick any city, USA, what should I do? First of all, we say, you need to interview, a handful of top tier local brokers and find somebody that you respect and that you like. So one of the premises, one of the kind of key tenets of our business is we won't work without partnering with a local broker. And that stems from a couple of things. One, our origins are in the industry, so we have a respect for the trade. But also, we believe that the results are just simply better when we partner with a local broker. And there's a number of reasons for that. But we, that's our message to sellers. And then we follow that with, if you want to go on the market, great. But if you hit 90 days, the right move is not price reductions. Right. And, if you have a $300,000 house in Chicagoland and you come on the market at $325 and, you're not getting it sold, the right move is let's get it priced right and we'll sell it. Right. Fundamentally, I completely agree that's the right thing to do. But when you have a $5.5 million property in Highland Park and the problem is not the price, the problem is the demand, the pool of demand is really small. And that those buyers come along relatively infrequently, and so it's a demand problem. It's not a asking price issue.
Yeah, supply and demand, no different than the day after Thanksgiving with Black Friday, right? I mean, Best Buy puts a limited number of flat screens on the TV and people pitch a tent the night before. Limited supply drives up the demand. A lot of supply drives down the demand, right?
That's right. That's right. And I think fundamentally our process is a powerful process now. It needs to be managed properly. I'd like to think, and, it's taken us 9 years to we still constantly are focusing on improving and innovating, but I'd like to think that we have a platform that's the equivalent of the Ferrari for real estate, and it needs to be cared for and driven properly and carefully, but it's powerful. And we can, some of that power is just structurally, and, our process has legitimate urgency. There's a sale that's going to occur on a specific date, and that drives, human behavior. So that's, we do have an advantage there versus kind of a traditional listing where there's no urgency per se, other than, when it's newly on the market. Then from there, though, you've got to figure out how you position the asset, how you expand the pool of buyers, how you set buyer expectations, which are just as important as seller expectations. And, we're not in the business of giving away houses. We're in the business of helping sellers, aggregate demand and bring, a market price. And if we're lucky, a retail price, that's our goal. And so just like we have to set expectations with sellers about what's realistic, we also need to do the same thing with buyers.
Yep. Yeah, everybody wants a good deal, but you need to be realistic. You touched upon something that was my next question, and for those listeners out there that, when I speak and train on national stages, I tell people the most listened to radio station is WIIFM. What's in it for me? So many agents, the elephant in the room with auctions are, and you addressed it already. So you guys are pro local listing agent. So in other words, the agent would, so if a property's listed and with John Smith, and John Smith gives you guys a call, you guys wouldn't cut John Smith out. You'd be really supportive of John Smith. John Smith would be the listing agent of record, would still get all the numbers in the MLS for the sale. And more importantly, his commission is protected. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And it's something we're really proud of. We're, as far as I'm aware, and we do pay close attention to the landscape, we're the only company in the industry that can say we've never conducted an auction without a local broker having a listing. Never. And that, that's the 9 years and over $1 billion, on our way to $2 billion in closed transactions. So, there's been plenty of times that it would have been easy to sign up a seller and let the seller, think they're saving some commission dollars by cutting out their agent. And a lot of times, most of the places we do business, we have to be licensed as a brokerage. FYI, it's just in not every. Some places we have to be licensed as an auctioneer, and some places we need to be licensed as both. But we just won't. We're not interested in taking on business without the agent, and and ultimately it hurts the seller to not have an agent involved, and so that's important. I think the other thing that you mentioned, and certainly one of the things that we know, and this is I think you'd find this insightful, 2/3 of our business comes from a seller calling us directly saying, my property's on the market, it's been on the market, I'm frustrated, I want to speed up the process. And their agent's unaware, right? Which is, quite frankly, it's a missed opportunity for the agent, and it's a missed opportunity for us because, quite frankly, we should have been able to get to that seller earlier in the process. We should have been able to get to the agent earlier in the process, and discuss what we talked about earlier about the Zillow effect, and days on market are problematic. So, start talking to your seller earlier in the listing process about auction as an alternative. And so the sellers are calling us and they're saying, I want to get on with this. And oftentimes we're picking up the phone, calling the agent saying, Mr. Jones just called us. And frequently they're surprised. We hear all the time, I didn't realize they were that motivated, or things like that. So one thing that we see is, there's a subset of agents out there that are that are really, focused on, they're secure in themselves, and they feel like their job is to make sure they're doing the best job possible for the seller, which means exploring all options, which means also being informed about the auction process and having it in their kind of bag of tools to use when needed. The other thing that we've seen is that the really enlightened and aggressive agents recognize the opportunity to not only get that listing sold, but for a typical property we market, we'll typically generate about 300 leads, inquiries. And for the typical property, it ranges but anywhere from 25 to 75 showings in a month time frame, which typically is like a year to 3 years of showing activity for some of these kind of upper tier properties. And then there's on average 7 bidders per property. And the really kind of opportunistic, innovative, business savvy agents recognize, well, I'm going to get my listing sold, but also look at all these leads, and these are people that ultimately I can sell other properties to, and they do, and that's, I think, also the hidden opportunity for the listing agents who we partner with.
Well, some great information you shared there, and I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say you guys have done over 1 billion in volume? 3 commas, I'm talking about 1 billion?
Correct.
Wow, that's awesome. And a couple other bullet points that I just wanted to, congratulations. That's very impressive. You mentioned, so again, for those agents, the listing agents, your commission's protected, the volume's in your name, and Chad just shared that in many cases you'll get inquiries. He said 25 to 75 on average showings at these properties. Is that what you said?
Yep, that's correct.
I mean, some of these properties, they get 1 showing a year, and you're creating that urgency, and you can't sell it. That's one thing I know. You can't sell it if people don't walk through it, right? I mean, sure, there's some sales sight unseen investor, but for the most part, you need people to get that emotion. They got to see the property, the uniqueness, the floor plan, the details, and many times they might maybe send a representative, but 25 to 75 showings and 7 offers on average.
That's right, 7 bidders, and I think the other thing that I would point out is, you're right. Fundamentally, we believe that real estate, every property has to stand on its own 2 feet. We all, I think, know that. But that said, if nobody's looking or not enough people are looking, that's the problem that we need to solve. But I think also for buyers, one of the things that when you're selling, let's say it's going to be that property in Highland Park, it's going to be without question the most expensive property to sell in 2017 in that location. One of the things that the grill in the room for buyers is, hey, am I the only person that sees value in this property, right? Let's face it, to have that kind of money, people have worked hard, they're savvy, and nobody wants to feel like they were a sucker or they overpaid. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that our process does for buyers is it provides a level of reinforcement that they're making an okay decision or a good decision, and that they're not overpaying. Yes, they're paying one bid higher than the next bidder, but it's not, they're not doing something foolish. That there are other people that see value, and I think that's also really important. And I'm sure those of you in the traditional business of selling properties, kind of helping a buyer feel comfortable, I think, is also important. And I think our process is really well suited to do that as well.
Well, you guys, out of let's just say out of 20 inquiries you get, how many out of 20 would you say that you accept as a client?
So, historically it's been about 20 to 1 where, we're really discerning about, the property, the seller, the location within the market and the broker partner. And certainly, being picky is important. That said, one of the things that's definitely a trend that's emerging that I think is, that is unmistakable for us is we're seeing sellers and agents come to us far earlier in the life cycle of a listing. Oftentimes, last year, about 15% of our mix were sellers and agents saying, this is my go-to-market strategy. They recognize that they have a unique asset. They recognize that the demand pool in a given market isn't that deep, and they don't want to wait around. They don't want the property to get sale. They want to get the best price now. And so, fundamentally, the earlier a seller and or listing agent comes to us in the process, the more effective we can be. And so, that's, for people that are coming to us as a go-to-market or early in the process strategy, there's less of a headwind we have to overcome. There's less history on that property. There are fewer days days on market that buyers seem, sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly, but think those are, there's something wrong with the property. So, that's also been a big change for us over the last 2-3 years.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I guess it's no different than, your typical sales, right? I mean, if it's been longer on the market, you're less likely to get more interest and better offers. So what you're saying is a go-to-market strategy. So a property that hadn't been listed for years or since this particular owner has owned it, they start out with the auction, and that creates even more interest and, more views and clicks and viewings. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct.
Now, if you said 20-1 on average, and, again, could vary, but so you guys obviously turn down a lot more opportunities than you take. So is it safe to say that a buyer that is looking at an auction, a property that you guys are offering by auction, you guys have done your due diligence on the location, on the property, the condition, that sort of thing, where it should be a no-brainer for a buyer to consider purchasing a property that's been vetted by you guys?
Yeah, I think, when you look at our website, conciergeauctions.com, you'll see, the inventory is very high quality. They're in desirable locations. So we are discerning as it relates to that. But I think, the biggest determining, we don't sell, and I'd love to say, we sell 100% of every property we're hired to sell. If anybody ever tells you that in this industry, they're not telling you the truth. So, and that said, we really want to have a very high conversion rate. And, historically, the old line antiquity auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's, their goal is to have somewhere between a 60 and 70% sell-through rate. Our goal is a lot higher than that. We'd like to sell probably 85% of what we're hired to sell. The 15% that don't sell, sometimes, despite your best intentions, the market just truly isn't there, or, after we go through our process and we have a pretty good handle on where market value is, maybe a seller, isn't prepared for that. But the flip side is we're very comfortable saying no, and not because we don't want to do lots of business, but we, setting expectations is absolutely paramount, and we really want to be very realistic with our sellers and agents to say, here's a range of outcomes that we think you should be prepared for. Now, we don't have a crystal ball, and some of the properties we sell, there aren't comps, right? Right. So they're very far and few and far between. But we really, start really pragmatic and frank and forthright with our potential sellers. And it's not unusual for a seller to incubate with us meaning we've talked to them, but they're not ready to hire us, for a year plus. That it's a very kind of typical incubation time frame. And we're okay with that. We've got plenty of business. We don't have to, take deals on bad terms. And we think that discipline is also something that's, served us well, but it serves our customer well. And our customer is the listing agent and the seller.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. For those that are listening, agents out there, what are some characteristics they should look for to determine whether or not the property or the seller is a viable candidate for the luxury auction?
I always say when you think about the seller profile, I describe our best client as somebody who values time as much as money. And what I mean by that is if you have a seller that says, I have $5 million in this property and I owe $5 million, and if I don't sell it for $5 million, I have a serious issue, that's not a good candidate for us, because, whether or not they spent $5 million to build the property has no bearing necessarily on what the market value is, versus a seller that has a property that they think the price is $5 million, but what they know that the norm in the market is 3 to 5 years to sell that property, and we say in 60 days we think the range of outcomes is $4 to $5 million, and the seller says, like, that can work for me. Like, I want to get the best possible price, but getting a price and a buyer in 30 days or 60 days is far more important than me getting a few extra dollars in my pocket. That's the right client. Okay. And it's really that intersection and for all of our clients, we've worked for some amazing people, very successful business people, entrepreneurs, CEOs, celebrities, high profile people. We have 48 billionaires in our database that we've transacted with in the last 8 years. And so the one common characteristic is they all, are competitive and value money. And so nobody wants to give away their house. At the same time, we are in the business of selling the most valuable thing that they could possibly have, which is their time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Can you just maybe briefly talk about, you don't have to go into specifics, but are you guys paid from the seller or the buyer?
Yeah, great question. So we get paid by the buyer. And so that's something that sellers also, like, is that in our fee structure, we only get paid if we procure a buyer. We get paid through what's called a buyer premium, which is very typical. If you would go buy a painting at Christie's in London, you would pay a buyer premium. Mm-hmm. That's the same way our business works, or you buy a classic car at Barrett-Jackson auction or something like that. One of the things, and this is in the early days of our business, and historically in the auction business, it was a very regionalized kind of mom and pop industry, generally speaking. And the norm was you would charge a seller an upfront retainer to cover marketing costs. And a lot of times in the luxury space, that was a big retainer, $100,000, $200,000 wouldn't be unusual. And we've been able to really kind of, just through hard work and determination, get our business to a place of being well capitalized. And so we've done away with charging sellers any upfront fees. So, we have a marketing machine that's going, that, we've spent over $20 million in the last 8 years building the database we have. We have a platform of marketing that's built, and, we sustain, and a seller can plug into that, and we don't require them to write us an upfront check. And then ultimately we go through the process, and the seller is responsible for paying their listing broker. We will earn our fee from the buyer, and typically we will also, out of the fee we collect from the buyer, cover the buyer broker commission as well.
So let me just make sure I heard you correctly. You're saying, basically what I'm hearing you saying is it's really zero risk for the seller. If their home qualifies, they're not charging an upfront fee. You guys pay a portion of the buyer's fee, so they will actually pay less in commissions potentially. And you're creating massive urgency, massive marketing. And typically from the time they say, okay, we want to go with you guys, what's the timeline? Are we talking, 3-4 months, 5 months, 60 days? What's the time frame before they get a contract? Right?
Yep. Generally speaking, we can have the property under contract with a 10% non-refundable deposit and a non-contingent contract in 60 days, with a closing to take place anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks after that. So 60 days to find their buyer, 90 days to have found their buyer and have a closed transaction. And sometimes we can do it a little faster than that, but that's certainly a comfortable time frame.
Proof of funds, qualified buyers, cash, as is?
Yep, that's correct. As is transaction, we prepackage all the due diligence in advance. So typically there's an inspection, survey, disclosures, all of those things. And so when we declare a winning buyer, that's a hard contract, non-refundable deposit, and no contingencies.
That's awesome.
The best part. It's the best part about it for everybody, and usually the buyer mindset is they want to close immediately. So last year I think our average closing was less than 3 weeks. So the buyers are ready, they're excited, and they've done their homework. Cash buyers, and I think for the sellers that's the best part. And there's the market spoke. There's the market price for the property. They've got a clean transaction, and they can get on with whatever else they want to be doing with their time and money.
Mm-hmm. Well, very valuable information today, Chad. For those listeners, many probably had misconceptions about auctions. Typically, I've heard others talk about distressed properties, but just to kind of review, and then I'll open it up to you for any last words that you want to share, or for people find out more information about concierge. But so what I heard you talk about is several things. First off, that the listing agent, you guys are pro listing agent. You've never done a auction without one, so the listing agent doesn't have to worry about being cut out of a deal, so to speak. You're pro agent, their fees protected. You guys typically get tons of inquiries, but you said 25 to 75 showings on these properties, and typically from the time you guys are hired, many times 60 days or less, you have a contract and you're closing 3 or 4 weeks after that. Is that, did I kind of recap?
Well said. And I think also most importantly, generally speaking, if I look back at the history of our business and where the growths happen, it stems from having a successful first transaction with a broker in a given market, and very likely, that will lead to many more, transactions together for years to come. And that's the key for us. We want to build quality relationships with enlightened brokers that want to do the very best they can for their clients. They want to grow their business. And I'm certainly appreciative of the time today to share a little bit about our process.
Well, thank you so much, Chad. And again, folks, make sure you tune in. If you haven't downloaded the previous episodes from the Luxury Listing Podcast, please do so. Again, Michael Lafito, founder of the Luxury Listing Specialist certification. So if you're a luxury agent already and you're looking for the principle of slight edge and bring more content and to your own marketplace, or you're looking to break into the high-end and luxury space, make sure you go to luxurylistingspecialist.com to find out more information about that. Again, Michael Lafito and Chad, thank you so much. And what is it fair to say the simplest thing to hear more and read more on Concierge Auctions is go to conciergeauctions.com?
That'd be a great first step, and I'm always looking forward to meeting brokers around the country and around the world. So drop me a line, and we'll take it from there.
Again, thanks, Chad, so much. I've heard so much great things about you guys. I met you at the Inman Luxury Conference, and just a real pleasure to have you on the Luxury Listing Podcast today. So bye for now, and we'll talk to you soon. Hey there, it's Michael Lafito. Thanks again for listening to our podcast. If you are interested in signing up for our Luxury Listing Specialist certification, or if you want additional information on how you can dominate selling higher-end homes in your marketplace, make sure you go to luxurylistingspecialist.com.